A daring band of pilots launching a surprise attack on the fleet of a powerful nation, changing the balance of World War II. I'm not talking about Pearl Harbor. I'm talking about the Battle of Taranto. I love history, especially about World War II. I've spent many hours learning about the struggles and battles that took place in the largest war in human history. The Battle of Taranto was far from insignificant, and today I'll tell you why it happened, what actually occurred during the battle, and the impact it had on the events of World War II. So I will begin by talking about Britain, who at this point had just lost its largest ally, France, in the beginning of the war. The British military had a problem. Their army was having trouble fighting the Italians in North Africa. In his book, Mediterranean and the Middle East, the early successes against Italy, Major General Playfair of the British Army stated that a major factor hampering British war efforts was a difficulty in getting supplies to the troops that were defending against Italian attacks. You see, the British only had two ways to get supplies to their forces in Egypt. One was through the Strait of Gibraltar, which was easy for the Italians to interdict their ships and prevent them from reaching Egypt. And the other was a long journey around the Cape of Good Hope on the southern part of Africa. The British decided to do something about their problem. They decided to, in their desperation, send a force of outdated World War I era biplanes, armed only with torpedoes and bombs, to attack the Italian fleet, which was in port at the city of Taranto. Sounds like a tough situation, huh? Well, let me tell you what happened to those little biplanes that were sent to attack the Italians. The British wanted to attack the Italians on October 21st, the anniversary of the Battle of Trafalgar, which was one of the greatest victories in British naval history. But serious setbacks forced them to delay. These setbacks included one of their two aircraft carriers, that was going to participate, needing to stay in port for repairs, leaving the aircraft carrier HMS Illustrious to go it alone. As the carrier force got into position, the 21 Fairey Swordfish aircraft were launched from the Illustrious's deck. The aircraft were to attack in two waves, an hour and a half apart. The U.S. Naval War College records that there were over 100 anti-aircraft guns to meet the attacking British and protect the Italian fleet. The first wave consisted of 12 planes, 6 armed with torpedoes and the rest with bombs. According to the U.S. Naval Institute, flares were dropped to illuminate the night in order for the pilots to find their targets more easily. Releasing their torpedoes just feet above the water to avoid anti-aircraft fire, the first wave scored 3 torpedo hits on 2 different battleships, as well as bomb hits on 2 cruisers present in the harbor. One aircraft was shot down, however. Both the pilot and observer would later be captured by the Italians and turned as prisoners of war. The second wave consisted of 8 planes. A 9th had to turn back after losing its auxiliary fuel tank, according to War History Online. The planes of the second wave hit the battleship Littorio with a torpedo. The Littorio had already taken 2 hits from the previous wave. Another battleship was also hit, bringing the total to 3. One British plane was shot down during this wave as well. Neither the pilot nor the observer would survive. The battle was over, but the war was nowhere close to a conclusion. So let me tell you how the battle affected the ongoing struggle. The website Second World War History calls the Battle of Taranto a turning point during World War II for the Italians. One Italian battleship was sunk, and 2 others would take many months to repair. The British fleet outnumbered the Italians after the battle, and gave the British free rein on the Mediterranean, at least for a while. The Japanese Navy was also extremely interested in the Battle of Taranto. They sent a military mission to study Taranto Harbor, recounted by Giuseppe Fioravanzo in his book, The Japanese Military Mission to Italy in 1941. The reason the Japanese were so interested in the Battle of Taranto is because they were about to launch an attack against the Americans at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Both the battles of Taranto and Pearl Harbor have much in common. They both changed the course of World War II, and in doing so, changed history. To conclude, I'll review what I've spoken about. I've told you about the problems Britain was having early in the war. I've told you about the events of the Battle of Taranto, and I've told you about the aftermath of the battle. So hopefully you've learned something, and I appreciate the time that you spent listening to me speak about the Battle of Taranto.